sad news coming in since last night, of course, that former three-time world boxing champion Dingaan Thobela has passed away at the age of 57 after battling with an illness. He held 3 world titles in 2 weight divisions in his heyday, the WBO and the WBA lightweight title, as well as the WBC Super Middleweight title that he won in 2000. To talk to us about this, we've roped in boxing trainer, analyst and commentator Colin Nathan, who's currently out in the States. Good morning to you, Noma Ganjani. Always a pleasure speaking to you. Unfortunate that this time around it's on the sad passing of Dingaan Thobela.
Man, I'm sitting here stunned. I was traveling, turned on my phone, and I got the terrible news. I couldn't believe what I was reading, and then Penelope, his daughter, reached out to me to confirm the tragic news. Dingaan was one of my childhood heroes growing up. I have such great memories and such a great friendship with Dingaan that I'm just left speechless. It's just crazy. I actually still can't believe it.
And I think those are the sentiments of a lot of people around the country at the moment, Colin, just taking it in that the Rose of Soweto is no longer with us. When you look back at his career, you talk about him being one of your childhood heroes growing up. What is that one moment in his career that you would say stands out for you when you think Dingaan? This is what comes to mind.
Well, there was 2. One was in 1990. When after 9 rounds against Philip Orozco, he was trailing on points and he needed a knockout to win. And Dingaan was just electrifying. He could pull it out with one shot. And he stopped Orozco in the last round. South African fans will remember in 1989, the year before that, Orozco lost a very contentious split decision to Brian Mitchell, who was world champion at the time. And then the second moment was when he fought Glenn Catley as a very fat, out-of-shape super middleweight. Dingaan's best years were lightweight, but he moved up, and then he fought Glenn Catley after beating Søren Burtis for the South African super middleweight championship at Carnival City on a split decision. So he basically kind of got his shot through that. And against all odds, he wasn't supposed to even be competitive in the fight. And going into the 12th round again, he was behind on the scores, and he pulled it out, dropped Catley, and then ended up, Catley got up, and then he ended up knocking him out in the last and final round. Dingaan was just, he had it all. Charisma, good looks, charm, good power, great boxing skills, great boxing IQ too, and arguably the best right uppercut in South African boxing history. But yeah, Dingaan had it all. He really had it all.
And when he was in the ring, you just never knew what to expect. As you mentioned, sometimes down in terms of the points, goes into the final round, pulls something amazing out of the hat. But let's talk about how he, alongside the likes of your Brian Mitchell, were just like the symbol of change for the sport of boxing in South Africa. I mean, we're celebrating 30 years of democracy, and they are almost the poster boys of South African boxing, the ones that a lot of people looked up to and aspired to be when it comes to boxing.
Well, Brian was before that era. Dingaan was during that era and after, obviously, in 94. So it's kind of like 30 years of freedom in South African boxing, which is another topic and discussion you and I can have. But Dingaan drew people to boxing. If you recall, a lot of his fights, he'd walk to the ring and he'd be throwing out roses to the crowd. And he really was the Rose of Soweto. And I said it in a post a couple of hours ago, while the rose's soul has left this earth, the petals will remain in South African boxing history forever. Just because of his charisma, because he had such drawing power with his fists as well, and obviously the change in 1994, people were drawn to Dingaan. You couldn't not love Dingaan Thobela. I mean, I've got such a crazy story. Every time I saw Dingaan, I would drive him nuts. I'd ask him how he would set up the right uppercuts. I was just so intrigued by the guy. Like I said, he was one of my childhood heroes growing up, and it's just very, very sad for South African and African boxing. I think we've lost one of the all-time greats for not just South Africa, but for African boxing.
Absolutely. And Colin, as I just wrap up with you, speak to me. You say he was someone that was close to you. When you got the news, you couldn't believe it because you were texting with him just the other day. Dingaan, the man outside of being a boxer, how was he?
Dingaan was just a very soft character outside the ring, always smiling, always, willing to speak to fans. Whenever we saw each other, he would always have time for me. I would always remind him of the first time I met him when I was in 1991 at the Cape Town Greenpoint Stadium when Nico Kamala fought Manny Galloway. I went up to him. I was 13 years old at the time, and I was probably pestering him. And he tells me he remembers that, but I always felt that he didn't remember that. But Dingaan was just a wonderful human being outside the ring as well, an absolute ambassador for South African boxing. And we need to sit up and take notice of a legend who's an all-time great who's just left this earth and left South African boxing.
Colin, thank you so much for your time this morning, and our condolences also go out to you as someone who loved Dingaan and the sport of boxing.
Thank you.
Colin Nathan there, he's a boxing analyst, a commentator as well as trainer, talking about the late now Dingaan Thobela, one of our boxing legends here in South Africa. As SABC News and Morning Live, our condolences go out to the Thobela family. We say, may his soul rest in peace and may the good Lord comfort you during this difficult time.